What's going on, guys? So today we're going to be installing some miscellaneous stuff before we put the clutch and transmission back on. So things like the pilot bearing, the shift center support bearing, the linkage, and some of the clutch lines need to go on before we start putting all that good stuff on. Okay, so a lot of the things we are about to install are basically just going to go on by hand. The shift carrier bushing, the shifter linkage, and running the clutch line is all going to be done by hand, but we still need a couple of tools. First thing we're going to need is a flashlight. It's going to make our lives a lot easier trying to run that clutch line through the firewall. I used a hammer and a rag to sort of help assist the pilot bearing to get it into the end of the crankshaft. An 11mm wrench and an 18mm wrench were used to install the soft clutch line onto the hard clutch line that we ran through the firewall. That being said, I am using a stainless steel UUC line, and the end of it does have an 18mm on it. If you're using a different aftermarket clutch line or a OE clutch line, the nut might actually be a different size than that. So 18 is for my case because I'm using the UUC stainless steel line. It might be different for you guys. And a 14, that is for hard clutch line that sits on the slave cylinder that needs to be attached to the stainless line that I'm using, is a 14mm. The last thing we're going to need is a friend. So this is young Arthur, and he is going to help us run the clutch line through the firewall. It is a little bit of a trick to get it in there, but with a homie like him, it's definitely going to help. So things like the pilot bearing and center support bearing are going to be relatively easy to pop on, but this guy is our main clutch hardline, so we're going to have to feed him up through the firewall by the pedal assembly to get him through. So I'm going to have Arthur help me out on this one. Arthur's going to be sitting in the driver's side footwell, and he's going to be basically guiding the end of this guy through. So I'm going to be going up from underneath the car and try and maneuver it up around into the pedal assembly area, and Arthur's definitely going to help out with that. This next part's going to be a little bit tricky, and I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to catch it on camera. I'm basically going to have to explain what you guys need to do as best as I can, and I'm going to show you guys just about as best as I can. Now basically, here's where we remove the pedal assembly from. The brake booster, here's our 4 nuts up here. On the left of that, we have 2 little cutouts. So we have a cutout right here, and we have a cutout right here. So these guys are where we're going to be running our clutch lines through. So this is the hard line we're going to go after, and then that is the line from the master that runs all the way up into the brake booster. This little rubber part does have its filled in, but the actual unibody of the car has a hole for the clutch lines because the E36s came factory with a manual transmission. Basically, the automatic transmission was built around the manual, so all of these little holes basically they're still in the chassis. So we're going to go ahead and poke these guys through and pull it out. And there's a couple little rubber pieces down there. And basically what we're going to end up with is a hole that is going to go straight through into the engine bay. So stick my finger up through here. My finger, I'm actually touching the bottom of the brake booster right in the engine bay. So you need to poke that hole all the way through, and now we're going to feed that line down from the transmission tunnel up in through here. Now the same thing is going to go with the hole on top. We're going to poke that guy out. Using something like a screwdriver might make the job a little bit easier. And there we go. So now I have that hole cut out with my finger. My finger is basically in the engine bay through there. So the upper line up here is not going to be that difficult to run through. We'll basically feed the hose up and grab it in the engine bay when it's up. But this one's going to be a little bit of a pain. So Arthur's going to be hanging out here, and he's going to basically, I want him to hold the flashlight through so I can see where the light is. I'm going to try and feed it in. I'm going to give him some needle nose pliers and see if he can grab the end of the clutch line while it's sort of chilling back there in the engine bay. Alright, for reference, here's the engine bay right next to the brake master. We're going to look down here. I'm going to be down there on the ground, and I got to feed that line up through underneath the steering column and back into here, and I got to find that little hole to run that line through. See anything? There it is. Alright, the clutch line is through. Alright, and so basically this is what you should sort of end up with. So we have the clutch line hanging through the pedal assembly here. So this is going to go in the back of the master cylinder on the clutch side, and it's going to be able to slide in and out like that. Now, that being said, the way I told you guys to do it was the way I did it the first time when I had the intake manifold off. It was a little bit easier. This time we actually went in with the threaded end and pushed it through here, and we were able to grab it right next to the steering column in the engine bay, guide it under, and then I went underneath and sort of pulled it, and we sort of jimmied it, wiggled it, and twisted it into its final position. That's another way you can do it. That's the way we did it this time. You could feed it up, like I said before. It is easier with the intake manifold off. You could try this if you kept the intake manifold on. Another way that I did it for the second swap that I did this by myself. I took a long extension, I took a socket, I tied some pink string around it and pushed that through here. Basically took the extension off, so I had a socket on a string that ran through here. I took the string, tied it on to the end of this thing, and then sort of pulled it through and wiggled it up at the same time, and that got it through. So a couple different methods to get this on. There's really no one single technique I can tell you to get this on. It's sort of, you gotta just go for it and just work with it and try and get it through. It is probably the most difficult part of the swap, I won't lie. So basically from here, we're gonna put this little rubber grommet through back of the firewall for some sound deadening, like that. Alright, so now our clutch line is ran. That's nice. Alright, so from here we're going to be installing the soft clutch line. This is actually a UC stainless line onto our slave cylinder. So we're going to want to make sure that it has this smaller hardline assembly and that guy is nice and tight. I got him nice and tight earlier. And this guy is actually a 14mm for the OE ones. And my stainless line, this guy is an 18. So I'm not sure what size the OE ones are. Or if you're using like an aftermarket or a different clutch line, it might be a different size. Something good to check. So yours might not be 18, but mine is. So we're going to get this guy nice and tight. Alright, very nice. Alright, so now from here, this is that hard clutch line, and we are going to attach our slave and the soft line to that guy. And so the slave is just sort of going to hang out for a little while. We're going to thread him on. That guy is 11 and my stainless line is an 18. Nice and snug. And to sort of keep the slave up out of the way, I'm sort of going to push him off to the side, and he's going to sort of hang out over by the lower control arm area. So here's the electrical connection from the transmission. Now I'm going to hand it up to Arthur, if you can see his hand down in the engine bay. He's going to pull it through just to sort of get this guy up out of our way down here. So we're going to hand that. You got it?
Yeah.
Hold on, we're caught. Alright, kind of feed it up. So we really have no need for this guy now because we really don't have an automatic transmission. So I'm just going to sort of feed him up under the intake, under the mass airflow. And he can just sort of hang out there for the rest of his life until I get a manual wiring harness. Alright, so next on the list we need to install this guy. This is our pilot bearing. So he's basically just going to chill on the end of the crankshaft there. So I'm going to wipe him down real quick with a rag, and I'm going to wipe the inside of the crank a little bit too. I'm going to set him in, just finger tight. And I have a hammer here. Now this is for assisting pilot bearing in, so we're just going to tap it in a little bit. I really want this thing to sit flush with the end of the crank. Don't freaking sit here and pound like hell on it because you're going to mess it up. So I'm going to put a rag over it. We're just going to give it a couple good taps to try and get it in there. So that's almost flush. There we go, that's perfect. So we want him just to sit flush with the end of the crank. Don't pound him in all the way to the back, otherwise he's not going to be able to do his job properly. Alright, so next on the list we have this guy. So this is our shift carrier support bushing. So the end of the shifter is going to hang out in there, and this is going to hold it into the chassis. So if you'll notice on it, we have two slits, one on each side basically. And this little side cutout on the chassis is where this guy is going to sit. These little things where it sticks out is going to sit perfectly in that little section. Now this little cutout is going to sit right up top there. So just to get the orientation proper, this little hole cut out up top is going to be chilling up there like that. So the first manual swap I did, it was a really big pain to get this thing on. The second one, it went on like butter. So I'm kind of curious to see how easily this one is going to go on this car. So I'm going to get one of the slits in first. I'm just basically just going to roll it up in. There we go. That went on pretty easily. The first one I did went on like a pain. So that guy's just going to sort of hang out there for now. Alright, so from here we're basically going to be prepping the shifter assembly and installing it in the car. So One thing to note is the shifter has like a little bend in it, and the bend goes back. The bend does not go forward. If it goes forward, it'll shift properly until you put the center console on, and then your entire shifter assembly will basically be shifted forward. So if you run into that issue, your neutral is basically where first, second, and third should be, and your first is way up in the dash. Your shifter might be on backwards. So you want that bend basically to be angled back towards the rear of the car. So we're going to be installing the DSSR rod. So I got some pins and clips here. I have a nice little bottle of lubrication here. So I'm going to lubricate the pin, pop the pin through, and then our clip is going to go on top of that. Now this guy's ready to basically go into the car. Alright, now making sure our shifter is bent backwards the way it should be, we're going to slide the shifter up, and we're going to slide this end through the rubber inside of that carrier bushing at the same time. You should pop right through. And this guy is just going to sort of hang out for now. I will go over installing this guy on the transmission in the transmission install video. There's a whole technique to get this thing on. It's really not that hard, but we're not going to worry about that right now. Alright, from there we install our pedal assembly, and then our clutch and fly will go on. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it fresh, and I will see you guys later.